Turok Evolution was released in 2002 to very mixed reception. It took a prequel approach and set this Turok, Talset, further back before the events of Turok Dinosaur Hunter. This game is responsible for the storytelling as to why the events in future Turok games take place. As such, this isn't as high-tech and futuristic as the second and third games were back on the Nintendo 64. Turok Evolution has a similar atmosphere to the first game, though with a somewhat slower pace, more easily compared with the second or third installments of the series. So in this prequel, this Son of Stone known as Talset is fighting his arch-nemesis Tobias Bruckner, who has a strong hatred for American Indian tribes. Some ancient stone is activated by Grey Bear, which opens a portal. Both Talset and Bruckner are hurled into the portal, and that's all the origin story you'll be getting for Turok. Rather underwhelming for such a legacy. Anyways, Talset lands in a village surrounded by a river. Some locals find him and bring him to Tarkeen, a cursed monk who has been ridden to the land due to a sworn oath he had not yet completed. Tarkeen had sworn to a now-dead god that he would seek out the Son of Stone, the one they call Turok. This is part of a prophecy that I would assume has some ultimate reason for existing, though that precisely isn't spoken of, and being as this is a prequel, I just find that a bit bizarre. You head back to the roots of the character, yet bring up another backstory from the past? So when does the prequel to the prequel arrive? Why should we care about Turok if we don't know the ultimate reason behind locating and training the Son of Stone? Maybe it's because he's the only one who can stop Lord Tyrannus, but it really doesn't clarify if that's actually the case. There was a series of comic books for the game around the time. I suppose maybe those fit into the lore, but you shouldn't have to buy those to understand the story. I think it's worth mentioning that the very introduction for the game is likely to be skipped by the player, as it starts off with literally 2 minutes of introductory credits. This all happens within the same cutscene that explains the story thus far. Skip this and you're put straight into the first level without a clue of what's going on. Anyways, Talset denies this prophecy that would remove Tarkeen's curse. For what reason isn't explained, but I would assume it has something to do with Talset's spiritual morals, or that he doesn't trust Tarkeen in the first place.
You must accept the burden.
No.
Accept the burden and release me!
I will not.
Meanwhile, Bruckner teams up with another force, the Sleg army run by Lord Tyrannus.
Bruckner.
His goal, as far as you can tell, is to rule over the land, and that's basically it. Anyone who opposes him or shows any sort of threat is to be eliminated. Bruckner just wants to get rid of all the American Indians, I suppose, so that would be his motive. I believe that would be why the Slegs are killing humans throughout the game. Probably as requested by Bruckner. You may notice I'm doing a lot of guesswork here, but honestly, the game does a pretty bad job at explaining the events taking place. The only way I found out this information was through the Wikia fan page, and while it does all match up to what happens throughout the game, I can't even 100% confirm that this is legitimate. It does fit together quite well, so I'm led to believe this is the true lore. The game ends with Bruckner's story arc coming to a close, but Tarkeen is still cursed and Lord Tyrannus still lives. The game was supposed to have a sequel where the remaining events closed up, leading into Turok Dinosaur Hunter for the Nintendo 64 and PC. Disappointing sales were the reason why a sequel never saw the light of day. I personally think Tarkeen would have ended up being uncovered as a villain all along, or something ends up changing his mind. Something about the design of the character leads me to believe there's something fishy going on. I think the story is indeed intriguing, but it's not presented very well, which will be a recurring theme throughout the game in just about every aspect. But let's take a closer look before we settle the score. Turok Evolution is a very difficult game to review because of a number of elements that both restrict and enhance the gameplay experience. For one, the weapons are great. There's a pistol that turns into a sniper rifle, a flechette weapon that turns into a minigun, some pretty cool stuff. There's also some generic weapons like a plasma rifle that sounds really boring, and a shotgun that, for some reason, just feels off, and I can't put my finger onto exactly why that is. The enemies are fun to kill, but the game is also terribly difficult, meaning you'll be killed in just a few shots from basically anything. Fall damage is also at a ludicrous high, and quite honestly, left and right, you're just gonna die over and over. The game works around a lot of first-person platforming in out-of-reach areas, so this only amplifies that problem. The worst part about all this is the length between levels and the fact that there is no form of checkpoints between them, so you'll be starting over quite a bit to a lot. There are also environmental hazards that you'd have no way of locating until you come across them, like ambient explosions that will actually hurt you, more often than not being a one-hit kill. The funny thing about this game is that the difference in quality between chapters is astonishing. One level might be an absolute blast, whereas the next one is a disappointing drag. As this is how I feel about the game, I've decided to briefly summarize each chapter, ending off with whether I liked it or not. This is going to be a long process, but I genuinely feel like it'll be worth it in the end when I come to a final conclusion. If anything, you can use these recommendations to pick off chapters you might not want to try. There's a cheat you can enter that unlocks all the chapters in the chapter select, though unfortunately you can't select individual levels within these chapters. But for the most part, chapters that start off bad stay bad. If you do ever end up playing the game, consider skipping the ones that I didn't think were very strong, but of course that's ultimately up to you. The first chapter is promising, bringing you into the setting with a couple of baddies to fight and environmental hazards. It is a proper introduction, entertaining, and great at demonstrating recurring elements throughout the game. I recommend the first chapter. The second chapter introduces you to the flight missions, mounting Talset on a pterodactyl. This introduces the mechanics of flight before the trickier segments where your skills are put to the test. It's not a particularly fun level, but it's perhaps necessary for getting the feel of flight. I loosely recommend the second chapter, though if you're going with that level select idea, you could just skip all the flight missions if that's not your forte. I enjoyed most of the flight missions, but from looking online, it seems as if it was one of the biggest complaints people had about Turok Evolution. The third chapter plays a lot like the first one, though with a lot more resistance. It is actually rather difficult at points due to the obscure placement of enemies. This chapter will likely demonstrate to you how infuriating it is to die, as you'll have to restart the entire level without any sort of checkpoint. Otherwise, it's entertaining and introduces you to some of the great weaponry like the rocket launcher and shotgun if you manage to find it. You'll know there's a shotgun around due to the shotgun ammunition placed about, which upon hovering over, informs you that you'll need the shotgun to use it. I loosely recommend the third chapter. The fourth level introduces you to the game's stealth mechanics in case you hadn't really used them yet. You infiltrate a Sleg base and free some prisoners here. The stealth works most of the time, but at some points I'd find myself tripping alarms without any visual indication as to why. Silently killing all the surrounding enemies with your bow and shooting down light beacons usually marks success. There's a cool weapon you can pick up here called the Dark Matter Cube that I can only find a few times throughout the game. It's uber powerful and I'm led to believe it's more or less a secret weapon. This chapter has some twisty paths and unique obstacles that were never confusing and played a good part in the level design. This chapter is certainly a highlight for the game and I recommend it. The fifth chapter brings you to a Sleg outpost where the game really takes it up a notch. It feels mostly generic and overstays its welcome with 8 individual levels. The previous chapter had the longest run before it at 4 levels, which felt like the perfect length. Throughout chapter 5, it's more or less the same thing over and over, and if you're like me with this, you'll be hoping that it's almost over, when you might in fact still be less than half your way into it. If there's anything here of particular noteworthiness, it's this horribly designed segment where you've got to destroy these enemy spawners, but the game fails to inform you of this in any way. The enemies will stop spawning from them completely, and shooting them results in the same sort of noise as any other surface. There's no indication of them being a thing you can destroy. Not only that, but you'll have to shoot them in this yellow eye located on the top of its structure, which is completely unnecessary. Possibly the biggest slap in the face is that the only reason you can't progress is due to this invisible set of walls that you can't walk past until you destroy these spawners. There's no obstacle or debris keeping you from walking forward, just the game's decision to halt you until you complete the obscure objective. This here is where I gave up on the game when I was young. Honestly, to me, this is the game's barrel from Sonic 3. It's also the first thing in the game that to me demonstrated how rushed to development it must have been. This sort of thing is inexcusable, but we're only just getting started. With that said, I recommend giving the 5th chapter a try, but maybe skip it once you've had your taste of its nonsense. The 6th chapter is an evil place.
This is an evil place.
It consists mostly of traps with some enemy hordes and at times extremely tight corridors. It's also a maze, which, you know, makes it even better, right? Early in the level, there are a bunch of grey macaques that will all make a beeline for your ass, and I never expected these creatures to do much damage until they've swarmed me in a very tight area. Holy crap, this was monotonous. They're also very difficult to aim at, since they're really fast and really small. Thankfully, there are some things this chapter did that, despite its problems, I did enjoy. One part with some stone statues has you collecting keys to then find out they've come alive and are hunting you down. There's also this part with Slegs on boats, which was kinda neat, I guess. It had some plesiosaurs habiting the water, which was awesome to see. But I then realized the severe lack of dinosaurs in this game. Most of it so far has been hunting down Slegs, probably 80% of the time. Slegs are dinosaur descendants, but they're not much more than your generic military soldiers from any other game at the time. They just have green skin and are nearly indecipherable when they speak. If anything, that makes it worse than generic military soldiers, but at least they jib really well. Towards the end of the game, you'll come across this puzzle where you have to jump into the mouth of a giant structure, then quickly make your way to a door before it closes. Fair enough, but there's quite literally a minute or so gap between entering and when the raptors spawn, which, by the way, you can't jump into the mouth of the structure until you've killed all the raptors. So if you die anytime during this level, enjoy waiting around a minute again and again just for the raptors to spawn so you can kill them. Playtesting. Did they ever do that? I don't recommend the 6th chapter. The 7th chapter is the second flight mission of the game. It's pretty short and forgettable, but it's certainly not bad. Frankly, going back to watch this footage, I had to really dig in my mind to remember it at all. I remember the level, but forgot everything that happened within it. If there's any level in the game to call filler, this would be the one. There isn't really a reason to decide on recommending or not recommending it, so I'll leave that one up to you entirely. The 8th chapter finally reunites you with the epic cerebral bore from the second game, a fan favorite. This time, however, it takes place as a secondary weapon attachment used for the rocket launcher. It also chops the limbs off the characters you shoot at from the insides. It's pretty cool, but I can't really compare it to the awesome brain-crunching animation from the second game, which is just all sorts of brutal awesome. This time you're not seeing anything new really, you're chopping off limbs the entire game. The only real satisfaction is from the animation, which is pretty weak. It did one hit kill all the enemies I shot it at though, so while it is incredibly useful, it's not as exciting as the predecessor, or the one that comes later on in the future. I have to keep in mind this is a prequel, so perhaps this method of execution makes more sense here. Thought it would be necessary to go in depth with this influential weapon, but back to the chapter. It's alright. The biggest issue was earlier on when you're taking down these turrets that have an awful lot of health, and take away sometimes 30% of yours in a single blow. This demonstrates how frustrating your ammo capacity with the rocket launcher is. Being only able to hold 5 at a time was a mistake. These turrets will likely kill you a number of times, so enjoy starting over and over again. What follows after this segment, however, is extremely satisfying. This is where I felt the real Turok roots showed. Here you'll go from area to area, flicking switches, opening new paths which welcome new enemies. There are explosive barrels and ammo aplenty to take down the opposing forces. This all just reminds me of how good this game could have been. The gameplay is tight, the weapons are awesome, the detail on killing an enemy is superb. In theory, this game could have been outstanding. Then, I'm reminded again why the game falls short at every turn. The next level is a key collecting mission, but this time you collect them from fallen foes. There was this one oil rig I kept missing due to a really well-blended ladder. The intention was to climb up it and kill one of the snipers to get a key. I played through this level for about an hour consistently trying to figure out where this one last sniper was hiding, but I kept getting screwed over by this one enemy practically hidden out of sight. How many people actually went by here and instantly saw this ladder? It's right in the middle of a straight corridor acting as a battleground. There's nothing showing me this objective. Did the ladder have to blend perfectly with the wall texture? To my knowledge, once you pass this crack in the floor, there's no way of getting back to this sniper, so I had to start over a lot. Not gonna cherry coat it, this level sucks. You should already know that I don't recommend it. The 9th chapter starts off fun, but it's ridiculously executed. There are these pipes that spew sewer waste that will knock you right off into bottomless pits if you're not careful. This wouldn't be such a big problem with checkpoints, but due to Turok Evolution's long level design, these are no more than frustrations that probably shouldn't have been here in the first place. This level is very challenging at times, with snipers off in the distance and hordes upon hordes of shotgunners, with some other smaller variations in the mix. Fun level if you take the cheap nature of it all aside. The rest of the chapter takes you through some Sleg battlegrounds which are heavily fortified with turrets, paratroopers, and spawners. It won't be easy, but it's very rewarding to complete. If it weren't for the cheap nature of the first part, this would be another highlight for the game. I recommend the 9th chapter. The 10th chapter brings you to a city overrun by Slegs, where you are then told by 3 of 4 members of the Senate that there is no choice but to destroy the city, breaking off connections for the Sleg army and putting a major delay in Lord Tyrannus' plans. You must locate the 4th member and bring him to the last terminal to bring authorization to the city's destruction. Turok finds the suffering last member and gives him the go-ahead. You'll be fighting hordes upon hordes to get there, and there's this one bridge that doesn't perfectly connect which you might fall off and will really piss you off, but other than that the level is enjoyable. I have to admit it overstays its welcome a bit with 5 rather lengthy levels, but with some overpowered weapons and limitless Sleg to shoot down, it still renders itself a highlight for the game. I recommend the 10th chapter, though this is really one of those that makes me wish you could select individual levels within a chapter. The 11th chapter is yet another flight mission. Despite the pterodactyl dying at the end of the last flight mission, I guess it's back for some reason. This time you'll be leaving the collapsed city. Between this, however, you'll have to destroy 6 power generators powering a shuttle station the Slegs are using to escape. This was incredibly difficult with the cramped environment, but I actually had a lot of fun with it. It was relentlessly clenching, and since it was the only objective in the level, I didn't mind starting it over now and then. You'll later on have to destroy some pipes in a similar fashion, though this time it's more cramped, and unfortunately it doesn't work as well here. After this, you'll be taken to an incredibly restrictive area where you'll have to fly your pterodactyl through near impossible environments. It's kind of a shit show. The hitboxes for this part of the game are absolutely absurd. I'd often crash into invisible walls and the likes. It was miserable. To boot, there are also a bunch of your favorite ambient explosions that'll do considerable damage to your dino. I loosely recommend the 11th chapter, if only for a lot of it being far too restrictive to the flight controls in this often cramped environment. The 12th chapter is about 2 minutes long. You're just flying away some more. There's really no reason for categorizing this as its own chapter when it perfectly aligns with the last one. I think they called this level out individually to give the game a total of 15 chapters. As with chapter 7, I have no reason to really recommend or not recommend it. The 13th chapter is a hot mess. It takes place literally inside a dinosaur, homing a Sleg base like those walkers you'll see in Star Wars. Really awesome concept until you actually step inside and notice it takes no interest in creating a unique approach regarding the locative. There's debris everywhere, similar locations, and a severe lack of player directive. Everything looks the same and enemies are constantly spawning, so it is very difficult to tell where you've already been. It's also rife with flamethrower Slegs, who seem to have a 50% chance of blowing up upon death, meaning you'll take a lot of damage from them at close quarters. The issue is that they'll usually spawn within close quarters, if even just outside of a door that opens the moment you're half a meter away from it, then closes when you reverse at the same distance. It's pretty hard to avoid being near them, and their running speed certainly contributes to that. The worst part is that once they've gotten close to you, it's near impossible to get away from them so that they can't hurt you. Couple that with the fact that it carries a flamethrower. There's just enough ammo here to pass the level, though with how much you'll get confused, run all over the place, and kill more spawning Slegs, perhaps there's an abundance of ammo, you'll just end up using most of it. You'll activate computer terminals here and there, and you'll get mini cutscenes showing you what door you just opened, but good luck finding those. Also have fun finding these little vents that seem purposefully hidden. The first partition of the level has you shoot one of them to then climb upwards onto the ceiling. In a first-person shooter, the incentive to look up inside a building is pretty low. I had to look up a walkthrough to figure out where I was supposed to go here, multiple times for this one level alone. Also consider that the entire place is basically exploding, so you might just randomly pass an area that has some ambient explosions going off that will actually hurt you and likely one-hit kill you. I think I spent nearly 2 hours on this level alone because of that. This is possibly the worst chapter of the game. It was far more miserable than Chapter 6. Steer absolutely clear of this one. The 14th chapter introduces us to Seductive Male Voice Guy.
The control tower is still operational. You must try to destroy it. Sleg air units inbound. Chase them down and engage them at will.
Also, it's another flying mission. Now you've got to shoot some of the stuff on the dino you just blew up. Basically, there's a control tower used for communications that you have to destroy, but after that, you're off to kill some brachiosauruses. Oh yeah, remember dinosaurs? Remember those things? Haven't seen those in a long time, have we? Shortly thereafter, you'll fly into a beach in the distance to blow up some oncoming Sleg troopers. You'll then head through a very cramped tunnel filled with what I think are giant icicles? This will probably take a couple tries, but it's nothing ridiculous. This chapter was extremely generic, I have to say. To avoid spoiling the game, I won't talk about the final boss particularly, but I will say that they provided nowhere near enough ammunition for you to be able to take the boss down, at least reasonably. They had these ammo crates all over the place and you'd blow them up but nothing would happen, so I kinda wonder if that's a glitch. The final boss was also considerably small for what would be a final boss. I was really hoping to come across some massive beasts, but in the end it's only somewhat bigger than any other large enemy in the game you'd come across. I wasn't really a fan of the final boss, though the boss itself in regards of visuals and weaponry was fitting enough. With all that said and done, now I can talk about some of the game's ideas that didn't really apply to individual levels, but more so the game as a whole. Turok Evolution felt incredibly rushed. There are many amateur mishaps throughout the game, such as ammo for weapons you used to have but have somehow since been removed from your inventory. Randomly at the 5th chapter of the game, the pistol is taken away from you, in which case also meaning the sniper rifle, and yet ammunition can be spotted throughout the entire rest of the game. Sometimes it'll also take away the upgrades you found for their secondary fire, and there's no reason for these to have been taken away from you. The only reasonable explanation is that it was a mistake, a pretty large one at that. I also questioned this nuke attachment to your rocket launcher that you'll only be able to use at the very end of Chapter 8. This thing was awesome. How come it only exists once? They really animated and integrated the mechanics for it just to be used once? This isn't even the end of the game, making for a dramatic exit. Perhaps they couldn't balance it out for other levels and decided to get rid of it for the rest of the game? I still don't see why it had to be eliminated entirely though. Speaking of weapons though, that brings me to the weapon swapping, which is just horrible. I have to admit a lot of shooters did like Turok Evolution, where you'd have to spam the next weapon button to get to the weapon you want to use, but at least in those games they weren't as difficult as Turok Evolution, where weapon swapping is practically essential. Take a scenario with the flamethrower Sleg, where you've got to make some distance, and you'd been using the shotgun up until its appearance. If you swap down, you'll get the bow, which is practically useless for anything other than a headshot. The flechette comes next, which is good, but this is just one of limitless scenarios in the game where quick switching is a necessity. Also consider it just takes too long to get a certain weapon you're wanting to use. When you're picking up items like ammunition and health, the game flashes a bright white screen and it's just painful to look at. The older Turok games did this as well, but it wasn't bright white and it certainly wasn't opaque. I think what's most astounding about Turok Evolution is its wasted potential. I can't deny there are some good ideas scattered about, but it's frankly hard to remember them with how much bad there was. It wasn't just the difficulty at times either. Many instances you'll find yourself going from one room to another to just shoot down some Sleg soldiers one by one. Some games can pull that off like Serious Sam, where the environment isn't so much of importance, more so your ability to navigate around it is. In Turok Evolution, your movement is more often than not stuck to moving around and shooting. Jumping just doesn't get you very much leverage and only really helps in hopping over an obstacle. You know how they say the negative outweighs the positive? Well, that's really the case here, as while there are probably more good levels than bad levels, the bad levels always end up taking more time and cause you to restart frequently, in the end taking up perhaps more than half of your playing time. I counted and I played 15.5 hours before I beat it. I wouldn't be surprised if half or more of that time was thanks to restarting levels again and again. The most prominent reason you'll be restarting is due to the game's cheap nature. Now I know I already talked about the ambient explosions, but there's also traps, bottomless pits, and of course, its difficulty. There's no reason to go on about it because I think I've drilled into your skulls at this point, but this game is not fair. I'd often wondered if the intention was to study the level design carefully, knowing full well you'll die 100 times before you've succeeded in making it to the next area. There were a few segments where I had to do as such, and while this might be fun to some people, I don't think this is what the Turok market was looking for. This might be where one would consider using the game's cheats. I mean, the main menu itself has a selection for it, so it seems as if the developers themselves were implying that they wouldn't judge you for using them, or perhaps they were even encouraging it. Much as this could be the appeal for some, I simply cannot play a first-person shooter without any sort of challenge, or else I'd feel the entire purpose or motive to play is lost. I'm sure a difficulty selection could have helped infinitely here, but as far as I can tell, there's just one difficulty you can play with. Now, I should talk more in depth about those flying missions. I know they're there to provide some sort of variation to the gameplay and keep it unique. There's first-person shooting and flying. Maybe they could have added some sort of ground segments with a Brachiosaurus? I mean, they did model and program them into the game. How hard could that have been? It'd be a lot more effective than 5 flying missions that are all rather similar to each other despite a few scenarios. I also enjoyed the flying mission I played on the PC a lot better than any of them on console. On the PC, you have the limitless acceleration of a mouse, whereas on GameCube you're restricted to one sensitivity. Specifically the GameCube though, where the C-stick is just this small yellow nub. It's unfortunate that the GameCube has the most functional version of Turok Evolution. Though I can't ignore the broken script animation towards the end of Chapter 13. For whatever reason, this is exclusive to the GameCube version. In the audio department, it's fairly mixed. The music is sometimes great, but usually sounds very generic with computer-made orchestral tracks. The voice acting is hilariously bad in a bit of a so-bad-it's-good way. The only convincing voice actor was whoever played Tarkeen. His role is surprisingly well done. I found Lord Tyrannus' voice particularly funny though, as he really sounded like what people would think Bowser sounds like before video games were advanced enough to have integrated speech.
I knew I smelled the stench of your dark magic in this.
This will do it, and now it has begun.
Otherwise, the NPCs seem to be all voiced by the same guy. There's also that seductive male voice guy who you hear randomly in the 14th chapter. Don't ask me, I have no idea what that was about.
Destroy the control tower.
Only other thing I can make mention of in the sound department is the obnoxious sound of waves roaring. This seems to overpower any other sound effect in the game, and sometimes the game ended up forcing it on loop when I was quite far away from it. I had to literally mute the sound effects because it was so bad at one point. The next level fixed this, but you know that doesn't change appearances. So to conclude, Turok Evolution is not good. This isn't among the worst games I've played or even the worst first-person shooters, but there's just so much fundamentally wrong with the game that I can't recommend it. It's not that I don't want to recommend it, but I found most of my playthrough to be suffering through the game. 15.5 hours, and even if just 2 of those hours were phenomenal, you'd still have a hard time pressing me to want to play it. The cheats exist for those who really want to give it a try still, but I'd have to say it just wasn't my cup of tea. I wanted to get this review out a lot earlier, but I couldn't sit down for too long playing this game. I'd either get too frustrated or bored. It's a shame because I was going into this one with such high hopes. I had said in an update that after Turok Evolution I would decide if I'd go back and review the original Turok series of games. And I know people say this isn't the best representation of Turok game, but honestly, I think I'm good. One day I will check them out for sure, as it is a milestone in first-person shooter history, but after Turok Evolution, I've got a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. Oh yeah, but one last thing. Apparently someone named their kid Turok in a sweepstakes deal for the game. Does anybody know what happened to that? Did someone win? Is there a real Son of Stone amongst us? Anyways, thanks for watching, and I wish all you FrameRaters a wonderful day.